So that change that occurred. So where we are now is I was in the void. I took pieces of myself, or I took myself and I created substance, and then I divided my mind and I created more entities, more souls as the origin soul. I created those souls. And then there was going to be a change because it was too populated. It was overpopulated around the first sphere of substance. That change, and my schizophrenic memories go into like all this lore, this detail of why I decided to actually put forth or take the steps to make this change. Now, the reasons that I thought of that was because each soul had its own partner, a soulmate, if you will, and they explored everything in the void together. I had one, but the problem was that back then, since we were just energy or soul matter, if we got too close, we would merge, and the information of both would be fused into one, and it would be lost forever, or the originality would be lost forever. So I wanted to touch my soulmate, like, it's just actually interact with her directly, or it, I should say, because we didn't have genders. I wanted to interact with it directly. So what I decided to do was take a piece of this first substance, and before that, actually, before I decided to take a piece of the first substance, I made more substance, more planets, I guess you could call them. I made more planets, or one more planet, and it was more gaseous than the other one, and that's kind of like, kind of like Jupiter. It was bigger, better, I guess you could say. But back to when I took the substance, I took the substance and I molded it into something that I could control. And when I was able to control it, as well as I could back then, I took the I took my soulmate and I brought her down to the first material substance, which was more solid, more rocky. And I took her down there and I told her to get into one of the chunks of matter that I had taken out and molded into this thing that I could control and I could be inside of. And I told her to get into one because I had made two of the little matter bodies. They were really simplistic. It was only like a rock, a chunk of rock. And we got into the chunk of rock or chunks of rock, and we touched. And that made me feel very happy because I was finally able to touch my soulmate. She wasn't into it. She was more into feeling the swirly, is what she called it, or it called it. It called the second sphere of experience, the big planet like Jupiter. She called it the swirly because it swirled around, and she got the idea that instead of feeling the swirly with tendrils that extended from them, because since we couldn't touch back then, we had to use like little tentacle energy things to touch the swirlies, and then we would experience like that. But and this was probably very dangerous. I keep on saying she, it went into it told the other souls that they asked what I was doing. They called me Origin. Well, there was no words. It was more like just like the concept, the thought form. And she told them that maybe they could ride the swirling. So they got into the planet, into the gas, into the storm, and they just rode it. And they had fun. And while they were doing that, I was trying to develop new ways of contact, new ways of experience with the primordial matter, the primordial substance, this rock, my soul, everything. So I kept on developing my experience devices, as I came to call them in this life, not back then because there was no words, but these experience devices. So what experience devices were they were matter that was able to be controlled by soul, by mind. And I made these things, and eventually it got very complex. The other souls, they came down too, and they explored, and they experimented with the experience devices, and they loved it. They liked it. So it got to the point where we got together and we started developing better new ways to make experience devices. And it was this experimentation, this evolution of invention, um, that led to life. But it wasn't exactly like that. It was primitive back then. It was not life, because life is just too complex. Life was the pinnacle, or not the pinnacle, but the end result of millennia of experimentation and experiencing, and um, surveys of the souls, and we just kind of, it was an evolution of invention, just kind of like how mankind is evolving in their inventions now. But back then it was just like robots, I guess you could say, not robots, but simple things. And we just stayed there in the abyss, and then after a while we made life.